What does it take for someone born into absolute privilege to become completely isolated inside the very palace that once protected him? For years, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor moved through royal life with a level of access few people on earth could imagine. Staff answered without hesitation, protocol bent, and when concerns surfaced, they rarely seemed to stick. But now, with titles removed, protection withdrawn, and even palace employees reportedly choosing not to work around him, a very different picture is emerging. A new memoir from Paul Burrell, a former insider who spent decades serving the Queen, the King, and Princess Diana, is pulling back the curtain on behavior that many inside the institution allegedly witnessed, but few ever discussed publicly. Late nights that frustrated staff, sharp words that lingered, a culture of insulation that may have delayed consequences for years. And here's the question at the center of it all. Was this downfall sudden, or was it always building behind closed doors? Stay with me, because the deeper we go, the clearer the pattern becomes. And if you want more deep dives into stories the headlines only skim the surface of, make sure you subscribe. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor didn't move through the royal household the way others did. According to Paul Burrell, there was a sense, spoken or unspoken, that the usual boundaries simply didn't apply to him. Burrell describes repeated moments where staff were dismissed with sharp language, sometimes told to F off without hesitation. It wasn't framed as a rare loss of temper. In his account, it was a pattern. Dinner parties reportedly stretched late into the night, keeping footmen and maids on duty well past midnight. Complaints surfaced quietly, but little seemed to change. At one point, concerns reached Queen Elizabeth II herself. She allegedly addressed the late-night disruptions directly. But even that intervention, Burrell suggests, didn't result in lasting adjustments. The behavior continued. The rhythm of the household adapted around him. Burrell argues the reason may have started long before any controversy made headlines. By the time Andrew was born, the Queen's role as monarch was firmly established. Unlike her earlier years balancing duty and motherhood, she had more space, and some insiders believe she was more indulgent as a result. Burrell goes further, suggesting she rarely said no to her youngest son. Whether that perception was entirely fair or not, the effect inside palace walls was clear. Andrew was seen as protected, and protection over time can create its own kind of distance. But insulation doesn't stay contained. Eventually, it spills outward. When privilege goes unchallenged, it rarely stays contained to one person. As Andrew settled into married life with Sarah Ferguson, that same atmosphere followed them. Burrell describes a dynamic where limits felt flexible and access felt unlimited. According to his account, Andrew made it clear early on that Sarah could have whatever she wanted, and inside the palace system, that kind of message carried weight. Luxury wasn't unusual in royal life, but staff began noticing something different. Requests grew more frequent, expectations grew sharper, the tone inside certain rooms shifted. What may have started as indulgence slowly hardened into routine entitlement. Burrell recalls frustration building quietly among household employees. Maids allegedly kept waiting, schedules pushed late, a sense that normal hierarchy didn't fully apply. It wasn't loud rebellion, not yet. It was something subtler, a widening disconnect between those giving orders and those carrying them out. And bubbles like that can feel permanent while you're inside them. But outside the palace gates, patience was thinning, and soon the scrutiny would no longer be internal whispers. It would be public, televised, and impossible to ignore.
Everything changed in a single evening. When Andrew agreed to sit down for a televised BBC interview in 2019, it was meant to steady the storm surrounding his association with Jeffrey Epstein. Instead, it intensified it. Viewers expected clarity. What they saw, many felt, was something else entirely. His explanations were dissected within minutes, body language was analyzed, specific claims were questioned, public reaction moved fast, and it wasn't forgiving. Headlines the next morning weren't about reassurance, they were about disbelief. Within days, Andrew announced he would step back from public duties. The decision was framed as necessary for the institution, but the damage had already settled in. Corporate sponsors distanced themselves, public trust wavered. The monarchy, long protective of its internal matters, tightened its silence. And stepping back didn't quiet the pressure, it shifted it. Because once the spotlight locks in, it rarely turns away on its own. The real break came years later. On October 30th, 2025, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor lost the last of his remaining royal titles and honorary roles. It wasn't symbolic, it was structural. From that point forward, the palace would no longer speak on his behalf. There would be no official representation, no institutional buffer. By then, scrutiny had only deepened. Reports resurfaced about emails allegedly showing Andrew directing a police bodyguard to gather personal details related to one of his accusers. Authorities confirmed they were reviewing the matter, though whether any action was taken remained unclear. Separately, documents reported by the BBC suggested he may have shared sensitive trade tour materials years earlier with Epstein, material that later appeared among files released by US officials. Andrew has consistently denied all allegations, but denial alone no longer reset the narrative. With the Queen gone and King Charles navigating pressure from both the public and Parliament, the calculus changed. The removal of titles wasn't sudden. It was the result of mounting strain, legal, reputational, institutional. And once that final layer of protection disappeared, something shifted inside the palace itself. For years, palace staff didn't have the option to refuse. Assignments were assignments, roles were fixed, service was expected. But recently, that changed. Reports surfaced that employees working at Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's residence were quietly informed they could decline shifts if they felt uncomfortable. No penalty, no pressure, just a choice. And some chose to step back. According to sources speaking to the press, a noticeable number of staff members opted out, not dramatically, not publicly, simply a growing list of no thank you. For an institution built on duty and discretion, that kind of silent distancing carries weight. Inside royal households, loyalty is often long-term. Many employees serve for decades, so when people begin removing themselves voluntarily, it signals something deeper than routine staffing changes. The dynamic had shifted. The same household system that once adjusted around him was now adjusting away from him. And when those closest to the daily routine begin stepping aside, isolation stops being symbolic, it becomes real. What makes this story so striking isn't just the controversy, it's the contrast. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor once moved through royal life with layers of protection, institutional, familial, structural. Concerns were handled internally, reputation was guarded, the system absorbed pressure. Today, that shield looks very different. The Queen is gone, titles are gone, official representation is gone, and even within palace walls, distance appears to be growing. Whether viewed as overdue accountability or a cautionary tale about unchecked privilege, the outcome is the same.
Insulation doesn't last forever. And perhaps that's the larger question this story leaves behind. Was this fall sudden, or was it decades in the making? If you found this breakdown insightful, make sure to like the video and subscribe. We'll continue examining the stories that shape institutions, power, and the people inside them, with clarity, context, and the details others overlook. I'll see you in the next one.